Welcome to Hannah's at Home and Make Something Mondays. Today we're going to be making paper pulp pictures and make your own paper pulp to celebrate Earth Week. Let's move on to what we're going to need for this. For this art project, the things that we're going to need are construction paper, just regular construction paper, bowls or containers. And then for my drawing space, I'm using a baking sheet with tinfoil on top. I find tinfoil works really well because it's going to be really wet. And then you're also going to be using either a blender or a food processor too to make your pulp. To begin, we're going to take our construction paper. So you're thinking of what colors you want for your end picture. And then we're going to be ripping up that paper and putting it into separate bowls or containers for all the different colors. I'm actually going to use a scrap piece of paper so you can see something different was cut out of it, but we can still use that piece of paper. I'm just I'm tearing strips. You can use scissors if you're more comfortable with that. And we're just tearing it up into small little squares and putting it into our bowl. Once you're all finished tearing your sheet of paper, or all of your different sheets of paper as well, then you can take some water and pour it on top. My water is a little bit warm, which helps the process speed up a little bit. If you have more time though, you can just use cooler water and it'll just be a little bit slower before we move on to the next step. So I'm covering all of my paper, just making sure that it's soaking in that water. My water isn't that hot anymore, so it's okay to touch it. And then we just have to put it to the side and wait. And you're gonna wait until it's absorbed some of that water. So you might have to wait a couple hours. Now that our paper has been in the water for about 3 hours, it's gotten pretty wet. It's a little bit easier to tear. And now we can move on and put it into our blender one color at a time, or food processor. So you can add some of that water to it too. Just adding the paper. And blend. Now I'm putting it back into the bowl. If there's a super sharp blade in the equipment that you're using, please make sure that you're asking your mom or dad for help. Taking out any extra. And if there's a little bit of extra color from the color you just mixed, that's okay too. Let's move on to our next one. You can even see some of the colors if the paper, if it's been in the water for a while, it'll start to have a color in the water, which is fun. After we've repeated the blending process with all of our different colors individually, so for me that was 4 times, then we're ready to move on and make our picture. So you'll find the consistency, it's kind of like wet oatmeal maybe, and this is what we're referring to as our paper pulp. So we can take all of our colors. As I mentioned, I'm using a baking sheet with tin foil. I find that aluminum or tin foil really helps because it's quite watery too, so that water has to go somewhere sometimes. And you'll find with your paper pulp, sometimes I like to squeeze, not pressing too hard, but squeezing out some of the extra water, We don't need it to be super watery, but it's still going to be damp. And then we can just create. It's important to note that if you make your paper pulp picture really thick with all of this paper pulp and really tall or big, it might take a little bit longer to dry than if you do a smaller picture or you're using less of the paper pulp. But I think that this project is a pretty neat way to reuse paper, so like how we use some scraps of paper, and then also to make a type of new paper as well. Once again, similar to what I've talked about in other episodes, your picture does not need to look like mine. It can look any way that you want. It can be any color too. I've also had people create birthday cards for me with the front being out of paper pulp, which is sometimes a fun idea. Another thing to note is all of my different pieces are connecting to for my picture so that when it's dry, it'll all stick together too in a brand new piece of paper that I've created, which is now a flower. So as I talked about, you can either leave your paper pulp picture now and put it to the side and let it dry, or you can put it into an oven that has been preheating at around 200, so just warm, and then you turn the oven off and you can put the paper pulp picture in it just to make it dry a little bit faster, but make sure that you're keeping an eye on it. Okay, I'm just gonna put this to the side now. There you have it. I actually ended up leaving mine overnight to dry. So yours might be similar to mine and need a little bit more time, just depending on how wet and how large your paper pulp picture was. Thanks for joining us for this Make Something Mondays and Earth Week. Make sure to check out Hannah's Toonie Tuesday video tomorrow as we continue to celebrate this Earth Week. Bye guys, enjoy!